So I'd like to introduce UWG, Dr. Micheal Crafton, to you. He is the interim president. As I mentioned before, Micheal has been part of UWG, and I've had the great pleasure to work with him as provost and now interim president. And so when Micheal and I were talking, all of us go through transitions and through succession planning and through transitions of leaders. And I just asked Micheal to spend a few minutes and talk about that, because we talk a lot about that, or I talk with the executive teams about what happens when we have transitions in leadership, and when we have an effort that's been underway, what happens during that transition time. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Dr. Micheal Crafton.
Thank you, Janet. Well, first of all, I think it's important to show appreciation, and so I want to show special appreciation for the award from Studer and from Janet. Janet and I go back to the beginning of that process at West Georgia. She's been a great mentor and friend, very, very blunt with me, and I appreciate that. She keeps me grounded quite a bit. So it's not for me, of course. It's for the kick-ass team that we have here that represents a larger kick-ass team back at home that deserves the award. And, of course, Kyle Marrero, who was our president, who was the pioneer in pushing all this through. In fact, I had meetings with him before I started working for him at some little scrappy restaurant in Carrollton to talk about this curious idea about a hospital consulting group coming to talk about consulting on higher ed. And I thought it was fascinating. And so we started scheming even before I actually was officially a part of the team again. So I wanted to thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And two, I wanted to talk a little bit, since as an interim president, I wanted to discuss just a moment the topic of anxiety. I've been to several of these gatherings, and I've watched Natalie perform many times. And as I've watched, I've sat back and thought, one of the several advantages of not being a president or chancellor is that I don't have to follow Natalie. Because as a provost, I was always in another sector, where I did my performance. She's an amazing performer and just disarming charm and humor, a wonderful job. And so now, of course, I have to follow. And I also, don't really care following Kyle Marrero, who was an absolutely amazing president. And did a fantastic job, and so following him. So I'm messing up a lot of rules of my life, which has always been to take a job and follow some, major loser of some sort. And I've been good to that up until here recently. So the title here, it's funny, this slide should say during a presidential transition. Somehow or another, we were playing with the fonts on this right before we shipped it off. And transition fell off, and my executive assistant called and said, "Oh my God, we lost transition before." And I said, "It'll be fine. I think it'll add to the suspense and openness and uncertainty." Presidential what? We're not sure. So let me talk just a little bit. And as I said, I've been with this journey with Janet and with Dr. Marrero for a long time. We started in 2013, I think, talking about it. And then 2014, the fall, I actually joined as provost under Dr. Marrero from Clayton State University in South Metro Atlanta, where I was for 5 years as provost there. So let's see if I can make this work. Yes. All right, so a little bit about West Georgia. Some of you might not know our story, and I won't go into much depth, but just a little bit. West Georgia is a fairly traditional campus, founded in 1906 as an A&M school. The 4th District A&M school in our area. 3 little brick buildings. The faculty could probably sit around one of these tables back then, and a bunch of male students, but then very quickly co-ed. 1906, very traditional agricultural studies, and then soon education, and education has become really kind of our focus for the most part. Still is on the graduate side. And Go West is the 2019 symbol, not the 1906 symbol, of us moving ahead, fast-tracking on an interstate, to great success. And so the new West Georgia, the new era is expanding and advancing. And just a few little bits about us. We're recognized now as an R3 school. comprehensive sector. There are 4 comprehensive universities in the university system of Georgia, so we are one of those 4. Doctoral professional, we were awarded that just a few years ago. Won a number of awards as Promising Places to Work, Institution of the Year, Askew Excellence Award. We have also, the University System of Georgia recognizes one program, a department, every year as the program of the system, 26 institutions. And so we have won 3 of those. I mentioned Mass Comm department and early childhood. Before that, Geosciences won that award. It's one of the first ones. So we're very proud of our achievements. And cheerleading, hey, 24 national championships in 18 years. That's not bad. That even defies mathematical logic, you know, how you get 24 and 18. Trust me, we can do it. That's just how good we are. Football's doing pretty well, and people are happy about that. Let's see, the sort of scope of it. We have 7 colleges and 2 schools. Actually, we now have 8 because we just added University College. Some of you have those. And so that is new this year, graduate school and School of Nursing. And then, of course, the standard array of arts and sciences. 86 programs of study. We just got an 87th one, I think, yesterday at the Board of Regents. So we have a new film degree coming out of Mass Comm, which we're excited about. Bachelor's, master's, doctoral, all of those. 5 doctoral programs that are doing well, most of it in education, 1 in psychology, PhD. Other than the R1s, we're the only school in the system graduating PhDs in psychology. And then leaders in innovation, E-Core, E-Major, and E-Campus. This is somewhat like Florida Virtual in many ways. And it's a system initiative, but housed with West Georgia, because West Georgia has been managing it and developing it and growing it these many years. So it's an interesting arrangement. They're on our campus. They actually have email addresses that's not WESCA, but rather USG, but yet there are people. And the dean of that operation reports to David Jinks. He used to report to me. Let's see. There we go. And then a little bit on the size. Last year was a record enrollment, 13,733. This year it dropped a little bit, experiencing some of that new student loss, I guess, as many of you are reading about and experiencing. So we're at 13.5, let's just say. Our freshman incoming GPAs are getting better. Our graduation rates are improving. In fact, our 6th year, I think, is an absolute record for us at 45%, something like that. Let's see, record degrees conferred in a year, 2,700 roughly. Teachers. We produce teachers all over the place. I mean, we have just about the largest footprint in the state of Georgia, short of Georgia State. Alumni, 64,000 roughly, 1,700 students working on campus. Mark Reeves, of course, deals with a lot of those. He talked to you a little bit about that yesterday. And eventually we want all 1,700 not only to grow and be maybe 2,700, but then in each 2,700 to have an educational experience along with that work experience. That's our goal with student employment. So now we get to the story of Studer and West Georgia. Our program is called Engage West, and I noticed one yesterday, Engage, who was else? Was a technical school. There, yeah, was engaged, and it's a good way to think about it. You know, focus the attention on engagement. Everybody engaged, something that we all do. So as a result of the strategic plan that was developed in the first year that Dr. Marrero came, 2013, 2014, we came up with 4 primary strategic priorities, as you can see. Student success, academic success, operational success, partnership success. And then core values around that, and then a vision, and you can sort of see them. It's a little hard to read, I guess, against those fonts, but these are core value: wisdom, achievement, caring, collaboration, inclusiveness, innovation, and then integrity and sustainability. And in the middle, a vision statement. The whole thing is West Georgia seeks to become the best comprehensive university in the state, in the country, sought out as best place to work, learn, and succeed. And that best place to work, learn, and succeed became a mantra. How do we get better? How do we improve? How do we work, together better, et cetera? How do we achieve the constant thing to get everybody on board with improving? So that is sort of the essence of it. Now, a little bit more details on the Engage West subparts. So, and most of this will be familiar. So the essential structure of our Engage West program were, first of all, the strategic plans, but then the development of a series of leadership development institutes, or LDIs. And many of you are familiar with that, right? you have LDIs on your campus. So ours took a large structure, I would say. So we had LDIs every quarter, so 4 a year, led by the president and vice presidents variously, but 250 leaders on campus would be in attendance, roughly, at each one of these. So it was a massive kind of operation in terms of, you think about leadership training or leadership development or leadership motivation, and I led several of those, and as has everybody here at the table from West Georgia. Addressing 250 at a time, very diverse units, very diverse backgrounds from all walks of campus was a challenge. And sometimes we would hit it right and get something that everybody would, enjoy and benefit from. And then sometimes we would see a whole lot of phones in operation and, yawns and many trips to the bathroom and so on. So it was a challenging structure. And I think had we to do it over again, we would probably shape it at a bit smaller scale. But so that was an important part, though. We did that for 5 years, 4 times a year, 250 people. Annual survey, of course, the engagement survey, the annual employment survey, we did that. We did the rollouts, and someone mentioned a pre-launch rollout, which I thought was interesting yesterday. We didn't do that. We did the standard, got the survey results, rolled out to the university, and then individual unit leaders rolled out to their group and then followed up in the course of annual evaluations. Scorecards should be there as well. I may have dropped that one off. There they are. Executive scorecards, and then scorecards going down various levels. We made it down about 2 levels below the executives, and that's about as far as we got where we thought it was effective. And even at that level, it was sort of, touch and go, with some units. For example, in academic affairs, the deans worked scorecards pretty well. We moved 1 level down from that to the department chairs. The results were mixed. Some department chairs got it, particularly if they were sort of administratively minded anyway, especially if they had a big department and they could see the use of it. Others just thought it was silliness, and didn't really buy into it. So that's kind of where we stopped. Quarterly executive retreats, this was something that Janet helped us organize and run. So every quarter, the executive team would meet and go over our scorecards, go over our goals, and then talk about some wins that we had, and then look for the next quarter. It was very useful to focus everybody. We'd do it one day, right, 9 to 3 or something like that. It was so all of that was part of the structure. Let's see, we got a little bit more. The outer orbits of core structure. That's just kind of a fancy title of saying, here are some other things that went on attached to the Engage West program that weren't part of the initial plan. I think I'm right on this. But that evolved like 1 year later or 2 years later or something like that. And sometimes because people who weren't a part of LDIs were kind of jealous, believe it or not, and wanted to be a part of something like that. So what's this thing y'all doing over there? I want one. So we had Engage West Staff Edition. So we had a special staff all-day training session, multiple sessions, to be sort of the staff LDI, basically. It was more than just leadership, but other things too. And then the Engage West Faculty Edition was something that, yours truly came up with because there were a number of faculty that weren't jealous about LDI. I think it's safe to say, as I'm looking at my team, they said, no, they weren't jealous. But we wanted to pull them into the enterprise, and my angle was to say, you're already a part of the enterprise. You are already, by default, co-leaders of the university. You are making it happen by carrying forward your discipline. You are leading your students in classes. You are a part of the leadership development. And so all of the activities that we do as faculty meetings of various sorts, various kinds of pedagogy workshops, all these things, that's part of Engage West too. I won't say I was 100% successful with that argument, but I think I made some grounds with it. I don't know. And then let's say we had other leadership programs, and these are going strong. This has taken off quite well, I think. So we have a series of leadership development programs for smaller groups. So Engage West Fellows is a relatively small group. I want to say, about 8 or so? Is that the number? I forget, about 8 members, sort of the highest level of very intense leadership development that we provide every year for a new group of 8, a new cohort. Some of those have come from this emerging leaders, which I think is 16 or so, that we have, part of another slightly lower level development, depending on where you are in the organization. And then below that, leading the pack, another sort of much, much broader leadership development program that people can enter into, no matter where you are. So no matter what you're doing, you can enter into the leadership program at West Georgia through leading the pack. That goes well, you like it, you have an inclination, feels good, you can get nominated to the next one. That's working out. You actually move up into a position of leadership. Then you can go into the next one. And then from there, there's actually a University System of Georgia one called the Executive Leadership Institute, ELI, and you can be a part of that. So again, all of this is outgrowth of the initial Studer-based Engage West program at West Georgia. And then the disruptio. See, some of you, if you're not academic, that's Latin. It's very fancy, very El grande disruptio. So Kyle decided, our beloved president, who was, pushed all of this with his charm and his energy and his just absolutely unceasing, relentless attention to all of our lives, suddenly said, well, I'm going to Georgia Southern, I'm out of here. So he was lucky enough to get a job at a bigger institution, and the system wanted him there, the chancellor wanted him there, he won the position, and so we all say, a salute, right? Bona fortuna. But the campus was like, wait, whoa, we've been doing all this stuff, and that's part of the issue, is that it can't be about just the leader. Certainly the leader's got to buy in, but you run the risk of being a cult of personality, and when the personality leaves, what's going to happen? What's going on? And so that's what we're talking about here for just a moment. What happened? Suddenly, he left. And so we have to fill in or stitch over all of the missing parts that result when a key leader leaves campus. And in our case, it wasn't just the leader, the president, but he also took with him the vice president for student affairs, so that position was gone, the director of communications, so that position was gone, and then we had our university lawyer just at that same time said, you know what, I'm kind of done with this. And she retired. I mean, she had a perfectly legitimate right to retire. It's just like, could you wait another year or so? But no, so she's gone as well. And then, of course, Engage West as a whole comes into kind of question, Is this something that we have to do or want to do or can do even? And then we had a few other things. Our director of HR was elevated to a higher position, left us. Director of Enrollment Management was a recent hire, and there was a sense of like, I'm not sure this is all right, going to work out, and so on. Same thing with HR. That's always the case. When you have people in those key positions and suddenly you have a new one there, there's always a little uncertainty. So that was not as a result of the president leaving. That just happened to be. It was just an accident. Our VP for advancement, so that's one of the 5 VPs at West Georgia, suddenly left and moved out of management into another area. And our chief diversity officer left for another job. So all of this in the same few months. And then we had to accept that we were in the age of the interim. the age of anxiety. And so we started doing the stitching. So the provost, that's me, becomes interim president. The associate provost, that's David, becomes the interim provost. Associate VP for Student Affairs, who's not here, but he became the interim VP for Student Affairs. Assistant VPs in Student Affairs change positions variously because it shifts the whole thing. The chief writer for University Communications, a legislative liaison, and the director of communications all got together and said, we'll take over the role of communications director. We'll just cover that in the interim, so we won't hire that position. An AVP for communications becomes the interim VP for advancement. I'll step up and do that because I know these people. And then we had an internal search to produce an interim chief diversity officer. So these are the interim appointments. Now, it's something you have to do, right? I mean, somebody leaves, you got to put somebody in. Everybody has to do that. This succession planning, which we had in place, so most of these were natural movements. There wasn't really a lot of shock or surprise by many of them. Some a little more than others, but mostly it seemed almost natural. And I'd like to argue that because we had spent 4 years in leadership development across all these units and in a fairly large LDI of 250 people who all worked together across units, and part of what we did, and in fact I think maybe one of the primary benefits of our LDI structure was that we worked a lot with people we don't normally work with, because we mixed up the tables intentionally. So we had people working cross divisions and so on. So by the time this happened, the big disruption, the disruptio, we already had a sense of how we could come together as a team and solve this problem, and cover these gaps. And so I think the appointments were made in this culture of sort of leadership assumption and leadership cooperation, made it fairly, I would say, without remark, without event for the most part. They were all just gone into place. Now, there is a little bit still of anxiety, of course, about interimness, how long is this going on? What's going to happen? When are we going to get all these interims filled? We're in a process of searching now, so if anybody's interested, go to my website. There's a special little category you can put in your application. And we should have, the chancellor is very aggressive with his presidential searches, so we're hoping to have a permanent person January, February, March of 2020. So that's the hope, to have that in. And then what I've been trying to do as best I can is hold as many of these decisions at, sort of at bay for the new president to come, and then he or she can make the appointments appropriate to build another kick-ass team, I suppose, as you would say. And so that's what we're doing. But it's not without some cost to keep things held in an interim position. There's a lot of will to say, just make all these appointments. Just decide them and move on. And we've done some, but not many. So people in places and peace at hand, but what about, as we said, engage West? So we covered all the gaps. We got interims everywhere. But then the big question is, well, what about this? We had a reaction by some that said, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired of it. That was Kyle's thing, Dr. Marrero. Let's just quit. Let's take a vacation. Let's close down the school for a week or so. But then we said, well, let's look at this. The president is missing, so let's all have a party. That was one attitude. The president is missing. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We're at a loss. That was another one, right? So this president is missing syndrome was kind of interesting to deal with. But it was real. People really, whether they use that as an opportunity to complain or to whine or to get something, or whether it's a natural response, I can't say. I'm not a psychologist. But it was a real thing that we had to deal with. So what we decided to do, and Janet was very helpful in this, to say, look, we got all these tools of leadership, we got all these tools of decision making, let's just put them into place right now. So Dr. Marrero left April 1, and right away we had meetings with the executive teams to have a strategy session to say, how are we going to deal with this president is missing thing? How are we going to deal with Engage West post-Marrero, right? And so we decided that we came up with a little mission that we were going to maintain our momentum because we were very proud of all we had accomplished, and we would keep things going. We would make some changes where appropriate. You have to, because if you have all this disruption, there's a certain, e-personnel, if nothing else. You have to make a few changes. But also, it's an opportunity to open up communication, listen to everybody, and say, okay, here's a little opportunity where we can assess what we've been doing and sort of set the stage for the new president. And if there are changes that we want to make now, we can scrap the whole thing if you guys want to, then let's do it. So we had an LDI on this subject to assess our Engage West program. So this was kind of edgy in a way. Now, Janet was nervous about that. She wouldn't admit it. But we had the 250 people in the room. Kyle's gone. I'm the interim president. Easy Mikey. He goes along with everything, right? So I said, let's talk. What do you guys want to do? We have all these parts. We have the survey. We have the LDIs. We have this, that, and the other. So I hear some of you complaining about it. I hear some of you saying, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, what do we all decide? So we spent the whole day talking about that. And we made some changes. But number one there, and I think I'm right about this, and my team can tell me if I'm wrong, is that once we opened it up and said, we're willing to talk about anything and change anything, there was overwhelming support for the program. I mean, out of all those layers of leadership cross, now of course still they're critics, here and there, but it was overwhelming support for the program. There were some suggested changes, but they were minor. In fact, I think there maybe were suggested changes just to say, I would like to make one change just because I want to say something and make a change, and then have my name on it. That's okay. You can make a little minor change and say, we'll tweak it this way and make it a little bit better. We've heard your voice. We've implemented your suggestion. That shows we're, sensitive to your ideas. So the LDIs, we had them every quarter. One of the changes that all the people all day long at the end of it said, well, why don't we make them 3 instead of 4? We're a university. We don't think in terms of quarters. We think in terms of semesters. So we have a fall, a spring, and a summer LDI. Boom, done. The annual survey was interesting because a number of people said, we do the annual survey, and then a little later we do action rollout plans, and then before we get the rollouts going very well, suddenly is another survey. So we haven't had time to really get that project done before we survey again. So why don't we do the survey every other year? Done. And also we were doing it in, I don't know how many of you do this, but we were launching the survey around the time of annual evaluations and merit raises, when we had some, to give. And it kind of muddied the waters a little bit, with the survey that's supposed to not be about, trying to curry favor or, complain because you didn't get a raise or something like that. It's supposed to generally be about an assessment of the workplace. So we moved it from spring, when all that happens, to fall. So now we'll have the survey in mid-fall. We'll see. We haven't done it yet. We'll do it next October. And then, let's see. This part I wanted to mention, the secondary effects of the Engage West program. This is my thinking. So it was very interesting to have that moment, to have the LDI. We rolled it out. We did surveys, and we sort of came to those various conclusions. But in looking at it and in discussing it with everybody, it was interesting to me how there were these kind of secondary effects that no one really had planned on or thought about or built into the Engage West program. So the LDI, for example, the LDI was about leadership development. We had a curriculum team. We had learning outcomes. We did activities and so on. All of that was a part of the plan, and we did it, and sometimes we were successful and sometimes we weren't. But what did occur is that there was this growing sense, I think, that the university actually cared about the leadership. That it 4 times a year gathered everybody up, talked to them all day, worked with them all day, spent the whole day, because the entire executive team's there. Nobody gets a pass, on the LDI. Had lunch, free lunch, snacks, networking, all the kinds of things that we think are important. I'm sorry? Am I out of time? Just about. Oh, okay. Well, I'm almost done. I saw the sign that said, stop! And so the care. Also, the survey effect was the voicing, that the voice mattered. And that was something, not just like I get to make this point, but I get to speak. My voice is heard. And then the Engage West secondary effect overall was a kind of connectedness among leadership and confidence in what we were doing. That actually, maybe, we knew what we were doing. And so we now have peace in our time, we say. And a new theme for this new year of PR with 3 wolves is Together We Howl. Thank you. I have stopped. Minor disruptio.